There was a time in America when both parties were patriotic.
If you do not have a border, you do not have a country.
It is not a fight between liberals and conservatives. What we have today is a fight between good and evil. One man can make a difference. One person can make a difference. And when you reach for something and you fall short and you're ready to quit, that is the time to get up off the mat and get back in the game. Thank you. This time, I really can't wait to hear what I have to say. Because I was targeted for destruction in the Russian collusion hoax, even though I had done nothing wrong. It is only through the grace of God that I'm with you today, and I stand before you as living proof that Jesus Christ can do anything. I am grateful to my friend Charlie Kirk for inviting me to speak with you today, and I commend Turning Point USA for building a virtual army of young Americans ready to fight for this country. One year ago today, President Donald Trump, then candidate Donald Trump, survived a brush with death. Several weeks later, at a West Palm Beach golf course, he survived another brush with death. But people don't know that there was a third brush with death. Let me read to you from a column by the syndicated columnists Evans and Novak from October 10th, 1989. Veteran Republican political consultant may have been responsible for saving his client, Donald Trump, from dying in the crash of the billionaire dealmaker's helicopter. Stone had asked for an appointment with Trump that afternoon to discuss several pressing matters of business. Impossible, Stone was told, because Trump had to fly that afternoon to Atlantic City on casino business. But when Stone persisted, Trump finally agreed to see him, saying that he would send his top aides to New Jersey on the helicopter and then have the helicopter return to New York to pick him up and take him down to Atlantic City. Stone and Trump had barely sat down to begin their conversation when they were interrupted with the horrifying news. The helicopter, which had been rented because the Trump helicopter was being serviced, had crashed into the Garden State Parkway, sending all 5 passengers, including Trump's 3 top executives, to their death. Trump was devastated, but he then called every one of the widows so that they would hear from him rather than on television or radio that their husbands had perished. I have never said, and I will never say, that I saved Donald Trump's life. I was merely an instrument of the Lord, and I knew at that moment that his life had been preserved, as it was in Butler, for some larger purpose. I recognized in 1988 that he had the size. I don't mean the physical size, but I mean the stature, the stamina, the courage, the independence, the persistence to be not just a great candidate for president, but to be a truly great president. I myself as I think many of you, am unsatisfied with the answers we have received regarding the attempt on President Trump's life in Butler, Pennsylvania. I am not certain that Thomas Matthew Crooks is indeed the shooter. I am not certain that he acted alone, and I find the missteps of the Secret Service in coordination with the state and local police unacceptable and unexplainable. And therefore I say, it is time for the appointment of a special prosecutor to investigate the 2 attempts on President Donald Trump's life. And while he's at it, I recommend a special prosecutor, or at least a new investigation into the attempted assassination on President Ronald Reagan. As the government has never provided for us a final report regarding that near tragic day. Now, let me say a few words about Jeffrey Epstein. I am probably the second author in the United States to write extensively about Jeffrey Epstein. In my 2015 book, The Clintons' War on Women, the longest chapter in the book, chapter 7, entitled Orgy Island, stealing that from my friend Sean Hannity, I outline the story of Jeffrey Epstein. I outline the names of a number of his victims, and I also demonstrate that claims on the left that Donald Trump had some untoward or inappropriate connection to Epstein is categorically false. In fact, Donald Trump cut Jeffrey Epstein off entirely prior to Epstein being exposed as a sex predator and being charged with sex crimes in the state of Florida. He banished him from all Trump properties and his life. It is also true that Bill and Hillary Clinton continued to socialize with Epstein after his conviction on sex crimes in Florida, continued to take millions of dollars in contributions from him, and both Bill and Hillary Clinton visited Epstein's island. The solution to this issue, because I too favor full disclosure, and I want to know everything about this case, is for President Trump to direct his Attorney General, to direct the interim U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York to move to unseal all of the grand jury testimony that was presented when the Trump administration charged Jeffrey Epstein with child sex trafficking and conspiracy to conduct child sex trafficking. And while they're at it, they should unseal the search warrants for his island as well as his palatial home in Manhattan, which are sealed at the request or the motion of Prosecutor Maureen Comey. Everything you want to know is in those documents. It is the Trump administration, not the Biden administration, certainly not the Obama administration, that moved in federal court to bring Jeffrey Epstein to justice. When Kash Patel, our FBI director, tells us that there are no records, even though we know and we saw with our own eyes that DVDs and hard drives were taken from Epstein's home in both New York, his ranch in New Mexico, and his island, he's telling us the truth. That's because I believe that evidence was destroyed by Christopher Wray and the Biden Justice Department. To those who say that this issue regarding a man who's dead and thank God can no longer torture and exploit young people for the amusement of elites. But to those who say we will lose 30 to 40 seats in the 2026 election, I say, don't be a panikin. I had an interview yesterday with a mainstream media outlet, and they said, how would you grade President Donald Trump so far in his second term? And I said, well, he has sealed the border. Illegal border crossings are down by 98%, and he has stopped the migrant invasion of America. And the reporter said, yeah, but what about Epstein? I said, he is carrying out the single greatest deportation operation of dangerous illegal immigrants in the history of the country. And the reporter said, yeah, but what about Epstein? I said, he has ended inflation and made America affordable again. And he said, yeah, but what about Epstein? I said, he has made America the dominant energy producer in the world again by far. And he said, yeah, but what about Epstein? I said, he has stopped the outsourcing of our jobs and turned the United States into a manufacturing superpower again. And the reporter said, yeah, but what about Epstein? I said, he has delivered the largest tax cut in American history for the American people, an across-the-board tax cut, including no tax on tips. And the reporter said, yeah, but what about Epstein? I said, he is defending our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, our fundamental freedoms, and most importantly, the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, and our right to keep and bear arms. And the reporter said, yeah, but what about Epstein? He is preventing World War III. He is restoring peace in Europe. He works hard every day to do that. Instead of pursuing an endless war and regime change and boots on the ground, instead of following the neocon policies of George H.W. and George W. Bush, he decided to make a surgical strike to destroy the nuclear weapons development capability of Iran. And he withdrew, and not a single American military officer lost their life. And the reporter said, yeah, what about Epstein? He is building the Golden Dome. This is the strategic defense initiative that will protect this nation from incoming ICBM missiles. It has worked for Israel. It worked on our base in Qatar, and it will protect the United States of America. The funding for it is in the big, beautiful bill. America will be protected thanks to Donald Trump. And the reporter said, yeah, what about Epstein? He has ended the weaponization of government against the American people. Parents no longer be persecuted and prosecuted because they're concerned about the curriculum being forced on their children in our public schools. And those who support the right to life will no longer be arrested for praying outside of an abortion clinic. And the reporter said, yeah, but what about Epstein? He has stopped the migrant crime epidemic. He is demolishing the foreign drug cartels. He is crushing gang violence, and he is locking up violent offenders. And the reporter said, yeah, but what about Epstein? He has strengthened and modernized our military, making it the most, without question, the strongest, most lethal and powerful in the world. under the leadership of Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. And the reporter said, yeah, what about Epstein? He has kept the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency, and the dollar today is stronger than it has ever been. And of course, the reporter said, yeah, but what about Epstein? He is fighting to protect Social Security and Medicare, to make sure that illegals and those who are not eligible for Medicare are not receiving it. And in the big, beautiful bill, he guarantees that 88% of those receiving Social Security will not pay taxes on those payments. And of course, the reporter said, yeah, what about Epstein? He has cut federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, radical gender ideology, and any other inappropriate sexual or political content on our children. And of course, the reporter said yet again, what about Epstein? He has kept men out of women's sports. And once again, the reporter asked me, yeah, but what about Epstein? He has deported pro-Hamas radicals and made our college campuses safe and patriotic again. And of course, the reporter said, what about Epstein? He has moved to secure our elections, including same-day voting, voter identification, paper ballots, and proof of citizenship. And you know what the reporter said. What about Epstein? Thanks to the efforts of HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy, he is fighting to make America healthy again. And once again, I was met with the question, but what about Epstein? He has released virtually all of the documents, videos, and transcripts pertaining to the murder of President John F. Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963. But it is only because of the persistence and the courage of Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna that the CIA last week was forced, after 6 decades of denying they had any knowledge of Lee Harvey Oswald, that they were finally forced to admit that they were tracking him, they were reading all of his correspondence, and they were essentially handling him in the 48 days before the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. I think you get the point. I, too, want full exposure when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein, but I also think it is a mistake to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Donald Trump is leading this country into a golden age. It will be an unprecedented age of peace, prosperity, security, justice, and law and order. Last week, the CIA released a special report that informed us more about the greatest single dirty trick in American history, the abuse of power in which the full authority of the United States government and the incredible capability of our intelligence agencies were used and utilizing 2 pieces of evidence that they knew were false and fabricated, the Steele dossier and the bogus claim that Russian intelligence hacked the Democrat National Committee, and that information somehow made its way to the Trump campaign, to remove a duly elected American president. This is nothing short of treason. We learned, yet again, that admitted communist John Brennan pushed to include the Steele dossier, which he knew was a fraud, into President Barack Obama's intelligence community assessment in order to use it as the rationale for the movement to launch Crossfire Hurricane and to rationalize the Robert Mueller investigation. It is time, well, let me say just a few more words about Mr. Brennan. He is not only a man who admits to being a communist, that was in a lie detector test, he's also the man who signed 4 of the visas when he was the station chief in Riyadh for the hijackers who attacked this country on 9/11. He is also the man who spied on a U.S. Senate committee that was investigating his illegal use of torture. He is also a man who, according to FBI counterterrorism official John Guandolo, actually converted to radical Islam when he was posted in Riyadh. And it is absolutely clear now that the House Intelligence Committee, under the terrific leadership of Congressman Rick Crawford, will have a report shortly with the assistance of Tulsi Gabbard and our ODNI that will take an even deeper dive in the rank conspiracy to destroy Donald Trump and his presidency. I live for the morning that 29 heavily armed FBI agents brandishing fully automatic M4 assault weapons surround John Brennan's home to arrest him at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I say it is time to charge Vice President Joe Biden, FBI Director James Comey, National Security Director Susan Rice, Assistant FBI Director McCabe, and the greatest rat of them all, Rod Rosenstein, with treason. At the same time, I laud the president's call for the appointment of a special prosecutor to examine the 2020 elections. Christopher Wray, the worst FBI director in history, said under oath to Congress that there was no foreign interference in our elections. But thanks to the work of Kash Patel, we learned only days ago about thousands of fake driver's licenses being sent from China to Chicago for use on Election Day. I favor the appointment of a special prosecutor, and the man to do this job is Eagle Ed Martin. We also need a special prosecutor to investigate the origins of the COVID-19 vaccination. I call on the Attorney General to charge Anthony Fauci for lying to Congress. And when, in his legal defense, he argues that he cannot be charged because he has a preemptive pardon, the government can finally test the legality of the auto pen in which all of those documents should not be honored. For those who are prematurely concerned about the 2026 election, I say to you that the average American is more concerned about the cost of a gallon of gasoline or a dozen eggs, the availability of affordable housing, or whether they can walk in their neighborhood at night without fear of being mugged by an illegal immigrant gang member. Donald Trump was not supposed to win in 2024. They said it was impossible. He beat efforts to bankrupt him. He beat efforts to keep him off the ballot in all 50 states. They tried to jail him, but it is only because of his persistence and his courage and his stamina that we are on the cusp of the greatest period in American political history. Tulsi Gabbard probably said it best yesterday. By the way, in case you didn't know, she is going to be the first woman president. It may not be in 2028, but it will come to pass. And as she said, as we forge together, I encourage you to stand strong, be joyful warriors, and always remember, with God, all things are possible. I do have a tattoo of Richard Nixon on my back. It's about the size of a grapefruit. It floats between my shoulder blades. To me, it's not a political statement. It is a daily reminder that in life, when things do not go your way, when you suffer defeats and setbacks, when you're disappointed and you're discouraged and things look dark for you, that is the time that you have to get up off the mat and get back in the fight. See, the story of Richard Nixon is an American story. It's a story of persistence and resilience. And it is a lesson for each one of us. Nixon said, "We are not a nation of quitters. We are a nation of fighters. Fighters for freedom, fighters for justice, fighters for a better life for all." The patriotism of our young people is not in shouting slogans, he said, but in our quiet determination to build a better America for tomorrow. I believe in Donald Trump. I believe he's the only man with the courage and the stamina and the resolve to turn around an ocean liner, to head this country to that golden age that I spoke of. I am as committed to exposure on Jeffrey Epstein as you are, but let's not lose sight of the most successful presidency in American history, and we're not even into the first year. I leave you with a quote from my favorite president, who said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man or woman who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs but comes up short again and again. Because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself or herself in a worthy cause, who at the best, at the end, knows the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat." This I can tell you. In the fight for America, in the fight for our Constitution, in the fight for prosperity, in the fight for peace, neither Donald J. Trump nor Roger Stone will ever quit. God bless you.